A woman goes to hospital expecting one of the happiest moments of her life, the safe delivery of her baby. She undergoes a Caesarean section and is later discharged with her newborn. But only a few days after returning home, she develops severe abdominal pain and swelling. She returns to the same hospital. Medical investigations reveal an abdominal abscess, and she is taken back to theater for a second operation. The patient later claims that a foreign surgical object had been left inside her abdomen during the first surgery. The hospital denies the allegation. Several years later, the dispute reaches the High Court of Kenya. Was this simply a recognized complication of surgery, or was it medical negligence? This is the story of Amisi versus Siaya County Referral Hospital and another, a case decided by the High Court in August 2022. This program is based on a publicly available court judgment. It is intended for education only and does not constitute personalized medical or legal advice. The case was decided on the evidence presented before the court. The patient in this case was Elizabeth Ambali Amisi. On the 25th of December 2014, Elizabeth was admitted to what was then known as Siaya District Hospital, now Siaya County Referral Hospital. She was in labor. According to her evidence, healthcare workers informed her that her baby was large and that she needed to deliver through a Caesarean section. The operation was performed successfully, and she delivered a living baby. Elizabeth remained in hospital for several days. She was discharged on the 28th of December 2014. However, her recovery did not go as expected. A few days after leaving hospital, she began experiencing abdominal pain and swelling. Her condition became concerning, and on the 6th of January 2015, she returned to the hospital. An ultrasound examination was performed. The available medical records indicated that she had developed an abscess inside her abdomen. An abscess is a collection of pus that usually develops because of infection. The records also referred to a burst abdomen following the Caesarean section. Because of the seriousness of her condition, the medical team recommended another operation. The purpose of the second surgery was to drain the abscess, clean the infected area, and manage the abdominal complication. Elizabeth later testified that she was informed that cotton wool and a surgical blade had been discovered inside her abdomen during this second operation. The hospital disputed this account. According to the hospital, the ultrasound examination showed an abdominal abscess but did not identify any foreign object. The hospital maintained that the second operation had been performed to drain pus and treat a postoperative infection. It denied that any surgical instrument or material had been left inside Elizabeth during the original Caesarean section. Elizabeth eventually filed a medical negligence case against Siaya County Referral Hospital and a doctor identified in the judgment as Dr. Alan. She asked the court to find that the hospital and the doctor had been professionally negligent. She also requested compensation for pain, suffering, and the expenses she had incurred. The hospital and the doctor denied responsibility. They required Elizabeth to prove her allegations before the court. The dispute was therefore not simply about whether Elizabeth developed an infection after surgery. The court had to answer several legal questions. Did the hospital and its healthcare workers owe Elizabeth a duty of care? Did they breach that duty? Did the alleged breach cause her injuries and the need for a second operation? And if negligence was proved, what compensation was appropriate? Elizabeth called a medical practitioner, Dr. Thaddeus Owiti, to give evidence. Dr. Owiti reviewed the medical documents that had been made available to him. He identified several concerns regarding the hospital records. The first discharge summary did not clearly state the medical indication for the Caesarean section. It did not contain complete details of the investigations that had been performed. The available records did not clearly explain what the doctors found during the second operation. The written report from the person who performed the ultrasound was also not available. There were also questions about different inpatient numbers appearing in the patient's records. He suggested that the retained material might have been gauze, an abdominal pack, or another surgical item. However, Dr. Owiti also acknowledged an important limitation. He had not personally examined Elizabeth. He explained that access to the complete hospital file, operating theatre records, and the full ultrasound report would have helped establish more clearly what had happened. The hospital called a doctor who had previously served as its medical superintendent and county gynecologist. The defense witness explained that abdominal infection and abscess formation can occur after surgery. He stated that a surgical blade is normally used at the beginning of a Caesarean section and then removed from the immediate operating area. In his opinion, it was therefore unlikely that a blade would have remained inside the patient's abdomen. However, the defense witness had not worked at the hospital at the time of Elizabeth's operation in 2014. He had not participated in the surgery or personally witnessed the treatment. His evidence was mainly based on the hospital records that were available to him. The court recognized an important principle in medical negligence cases. A poor medical outcome does not automatically mean that a doctor or hospital was negligent. Infections, abscesses, and wound complications can sometimes develop after surgery, even when healthcare professionals have acted properly. Doctors are not legally expected to guarantee that every procedure will be successful or completely free from complications. The law generally asks whether a healthcare professional exercised the reasonable skill and care expected from a competent professional working under similar circumstances. Therefore, the fact that Elizabeth developed an abscess was not, by itself, enough to prove negligence. The court needed to consider whether the medical team had exercised reasonable care and whether the hospital had produced sufficient evidence to explain what happened. This is where the hospital's records became extremely important. The hospital stated that an instrument count had been conducted after the Caesarean section. However, the instrument count record was not produced in court. The hospital maintained that the ultrasound examination did not show any foreign object. However, the complete written ultrasound report was not produced. The healthcare workers who had participated in the original operation were not called to testify. The hospital also failed to produce clear and complete records showing the safety procedures followed during the surgery. Some of the nursing and treatment records were incomplete or unclear. The court observed that the hospital was in the best position to know who had been on duty, who had participated in the operation, whether surgical materials had been counted, and what had been discovered during the second surgery. The hospital was also in the best position to produce the theatre records, instrument count sheets, nursing notes, duty rosters, and complete investigation reports. Where important evidence is under the control of one party, but that party fails to produce it, a court may draw what is known as an adverse inference. In simple language, the court may conclude that the missing evidence would probably not have supported the party that failed to produce it. After considering the testimony and the available documents, the High Court found that Elizabeth had proved her case on a balance of probabilities. A balance of probabilities is the standard used in most civil cases. It means that the court considered Elizabeth's version of events more likely to be true than not, based on the evidence presented. The court found that the hospital and the doctor owed Elizabeth a duty of care. It found that this duty had been breached. It also found that the breach caused her pain, complications, and the need for a second operation. The hospital was held legally responsible for the actions of the healthcare workers involved in her treatment. However, an important distinction must be made. The court did not physically examine or conclusively identify a particular blade or piece of cotton wool. Instead, after considering the patient's account, the medical opinion, and the hospital's failure to produce important records and witnesses, the court concluded that a foreign surgical object or material had probably been left inside her during the original operation. The judgment was delivered on the 17th of August 2022 by Justice Rosaline Aburili. The hospital and the doctor were found jointly and severally liable. Elizabeth was awarded 4 million Kenya shillings in general damages for pain and suffering. She was also awarded 8,205 Kenya shillings in special damages that had been specifically claimed and proved. The court additionally awarded her the costs of the case and interest in accordance with the judgment. However, the court declined to award punitive or aggravated damages because there was not enough evidence to justify that additional form of compensation. This case provides several important lessons for healthcare professionals. The first lesson is the importance of surgical counts. Swabs, gauze, blades, needles, and surgical instruments should be counted according to the hospital's approved procedures. Counts should be performed before surgery, during the operation where appropriate, and before the patient leaves theatre. The final count should be documented clearly and signed by the responsible members of the surgical team. When there is a discrepancy, it should never be ignored. The surgical team must investigate the discrepancy and confirm that no item has been left inside the patient. The second lesson concerns operation notes. A complete operation record should clearly state why the surgery was performed, the procedure that was carried out, the names or roles of the healthcare workers involved, and the findings made during the operation. It should also record any complications, the result of the instrument and swab count, the patient's condition at the end of surgery, and the postoperative treatment plan. The third lesson concerns the management of postoperative complications. When a patient returns after surgery, the healthcare team should document the symptoms, examination findings, investigations, diagnosis, and treatment plan. The fourth lesson is the importance of supervising interns and trainees. Interns form an important part of the healthcare system and must be given opportunities to learn. However, they should work within their level of competence and under appropriate supervision. The records should make it clear who performed the procedure and who provided supervision. The fifth lesson concerns the preservation of medical evidence. Ultrasound reports, theatre registers, instrument count sheets, consent forms, nursing notes, and duty rosters may become important evidence many years after the treatment occurred. A missing record can make an otherwise defensible clinical case extremely difficult to explain in court. There are also lessons for patients. Before a planned operation, patients should ask why the procedure is necessary, what benefits are expected, and what important risks may occur. They should ask whether there are reasonable alternatives and what warning signs should make them return to hospital. After surgery, a patient should seek medical attention for worsening abdominal pain, swelling, fever, discharge from the wound, persistent vomiting, or any other concerning symptom. Patients should also keep copies of their discharge summaries, prescriptions, laboratory reports, imaging reports, appointment cards, and receipts. However, patients should remember that not every complication amounts to medical negligence. A medical complication may occur even where proper care was provided. Independent medical assessment and careful examination of the records are usually required before negligence can be established. Perhaps the strongest message from this case is that clinical care and medical documentation cannot be separated. A healthcare team may believe that it acted correctly. But if the records do not show what was done, who did it, what was found, and what safety checks were completed, the hospital may be unable to demonstrate that reasonable care was provided. Medical records are not merely paperwork. They support continuity of care. They protect patients. They guide healthcare professionals. And when a dispute reaches court, they may become the strongest witness available or the most damaging silence. In Amisi versus Siaya County Referral Hospital and another, the court did not hold the defendants liable simply because the patient developed an infection. The court reached its decision after considering the patient's testimony, the available medical opinion, the incomplete documentation, and the hospital's failure to produce important records and witnesses. The patient was awarded compensation for the pain and harm associated with her complications and second operation. For healthcare professionals, the lesson is clear. Count carefully, document completely, supervise appropriately, investigate complications openly, and never underestimate the medico-legal importance of a properly maintained patient record. What is your view of this judgment? Do you think the missing hospital and theater records became the most important part of the case? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments. Subscribe to Wilfred the Health Educator for more real medical legal stories, patient safety discussions, and practical lessons for safer healthcare. Real cases, real lessons, safer healthcare. This program is for education only and does not constitute medical or legal advice.